everyone. Welcome back to another Client Corner with Elly Virtually. Today, I'm excited to be joined by Leroy Wilson Jr., Esquire, author, attorney, and global advocate, and the author of History is Lived Before It Is Written, the autobiography of Leroy Wilson Jr., Esquire. We've had the honor of supporting Leroy through the publishing process of his autobiography, and today we're going to talk a little bit about his story, his journey, and his experience bringing this incredible book to life. Leroy, thank you so much for joining me today.
You're quite
Um,
welcome.
all right, let's get started. Can you introduce yourself and share a little bit about your background and what inspired you to write your autobiography?
Well, my name is Leroy Wilson Jr. I was born in 1939 in Savannah, Georgia, in a house that my grandmother was running, as a matter of fact. I grew up in Savannah. I attended elementary, junior high, and high school in Savannah. And at the time, Savannah was segregated, but to us, we didn't know any better. And so we thought we were just as good as the white students and weren't too much bothered by it because that's just the way it was. But I left Savannah and went to Atlanta in 1957 to attend Morehouse College in Atlanta. And as a lot of your viewers will know, our most famous graduate, among others, was Martin Luther King Jr. During the time that I was at Morehouse, I was given a Merrill travel study grant to study anywhere I wanted to. At that time, unfortunately, I didn't know anything about African universities. But I was in the sciences, and a decision was made to send me to Heidelberg. But Heidelberg had a prerequisite for studies that I had not satisfied. So I wound up going to the University of Vienna in Vienna, Austria, and studied there and in the Institute of European Studies program in Vienna. Came back to Morehouse, graduated in 1962, had honors in mathematics and chemistry, got honors in both areas. Left, went to the University of California, Berkeley, was in chemistry for a while. I earned my master's degree in physical chemistry, and then decided that I wanted to go to law school. At that time, I didn't have any long-term plans in terms of how I was going to be employed, how I was going to support myself, and so forth. A lot of the students in the sciences wanted to go to medical school. I just enjoyed the discipline. So at the time that the little girls were bombed in that church in Birmingham, I decided that I thought I should go to law school and help out in some way. And so I went to law school. I do write about a very interesting episode in the book, and that is that the dean was very reluctant to admit me because I was late in applying. But the story is that there was only one other black applicant in my class. And once he saw my transcripts, he changed the story. I wrote about the intervention of somebody who was in his office who had seen my interview with him and told me to come back, bring my transcript and so forth. And I was admitted and I did graduate. Um, in my graduating year, which was in 1968 in law school, Ebony Magazine, for those who might not know and who are out of the United States, published news about Black people. It was part of a family of publications like Ebony, Jet, The Black World, and so forth. But Ebony had an ad saying that IBM was an equal opportunity employer and they were trying to recruit Black people. And so I applied and I started working as a lawyer um, at IBM. But the thing that inspired me to write the book went way, way, way back because one of the things that I noticed is that we were dying and not passing on the knowledge that we had, some of which was fairly unique, and people didn't know that. I'm going to relate a little bit of that in this interview. Um, but it was really crystallized for me in 1977. At that time, I had left IBM and I was with Union Carbide Corporation, and I was in the Philadelphia area to represent Union Carbide in the acquisition of a company. The local counsel that I was dealing with at the time from the law firm of Ballard Spahr, which was one of the leading firms down in Philadelphia, took me to lunch at the Union League in Philadelphia. I had never heard of the Union League, but as I walked up, there were two black men polishing the brass rails leading up the stairs to the Union League doors. And they burst out in big smiles. I had no idea why, as if they were greeting a celebrity. So we went inside the place, and as it's a huge building, and as we walked along, I could see inside the various rooms. And one of the most striking things that I saw were tables where there were old white men talking to young white men. There were no black people. And I'm sure that they were passing on some knowledge. Now, as I went upstairs, there was a smoking room. And again, nothing but white men smoking cigars. Almost choked me to death. But there were no women either. And if there were any women anywhere else, there were very few of them. So, as I said earlier, that sort of crystallized my need to be able one day to write my story. Um, I was in Japan in 1989 as a part of an NAACP group to address some of the racist comments that some current, future, and former Japanese officials were making about Black people in the United States. So we went over to address some of those issues. When I say we, there were people from the Western region of the NAACP, headed by Jim Martin, whom I had met earlier. And I received a call from Mel Washington, who was a friend of mine in Japan, that I had met some 10 years earlier, saying that they needed some help in organizing the trip. And so I said, okay, I'd be happy to help them. And during the conversation, Jim or Matthew asked me what my fee would be. And I said, well, my fee would be a seat on the delegation. I want to go. And so they worked that out and we all went to Japan. However, when we were there, we met with uh, the local branch of the NACP in Japan, branch 2323, which was headed by a Reverend Archibald Buchanan. And he explained why there was a need for the NACP to organize a branch in Japan. And they had a motto, and that motto again crystallized some things for me. And that came out of the Second Timothy chapter 1, verse 7, which a lot of my friends are going to be surprised to hear me recite. But it says, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind." And that has stuck with me. And so sometimes I will say to people, prayer is fine, but Fannie Lou Hamer said you can pray until you drop dead, but if you don't get up and do something, it's not going to help. And so I've interpreted the verse from Timothy to say that God gave us the brains to do something with, and we should do those things. And that has kept me in very good stead and has comforted me. Now, in another set of experiences, there's a man in Uganda by the name of Gordon Wavamuno. Gordon, at that time, and probably still is one of the largest businessmen in Uganda, and he wrote a book called The Story of an African Entrepreneur, which is the story of his life. And he starts out the book by saying, "I thought that if I was going to spend some time thinking, I might as well think big." And currently, Aliko Dangote, who is the richest man in Africa and who is a Nigerian, it said the same thing. So having been blessed with this gift of the ability to make things happen if we apply ourselves, um, I was just encouraged even more. Even now, at the age of almost 87, I still act as if I'm a teenager, exploring new opportunities, not business opportunities, but consulting ones where I can exchange information. And I found that to be extremely helpful. As a matter of fact, I just came through Ethiopia on my way here. I have a very close friend there, a couple of them actually, and I met both of them while I was there. But one was Teodros Getachew Tulu, who has a law firm there, and he wanted me to come in and say a few words to some of his young associates. I enjoyed doing that. So again, there was this exchange of information, and they had the same kinds of questions, how did you do this? How did you do that? And I explained those things. But one of the things that I did talk to them about is something that I started practicing a very long time ago when I was trying to learn how to write. And the ability to write cannot and should not be underestimated. When I came through college and graduate school, for the most part, the sciences didn't require you to write any prose or narratives, those kinds of things. We dealt with formulas and numbers and that sort of thing. So I had to study how to write. But out of all of that, and I still do, if I see articles on writing, I might read the article. Um, the fundamental thing is to have a clear idea of what it is in your head that you want to say, and then write it down. What you want to do is to be able to have the idea that you have clearly expressed and transformed and transferred into the brain of the person that you're communicating with.
Hmm.
So they, appreciated that. Um, Another person who influenced me quite a bit, and I want to just pause here to say sometimes an individual can say one thing and it will just stick with you through life. And it's sort of a guidepost and it's an anchor. And so when you're in situations where you're uncertain, then you fall back on those anchors and they will pull you out of those situations. Now, Dr. Lonnie Cross, who was an absolutely brilliant mathematician and taught me advanced calculus, um, had a saying that whatever happens and wherever you are, you ought to feel comfortable in your skin. And my first application of that was not in being in essentially an all-white environment in law firms or law departments in corporations, but one time I was handling a transaction for Union Carbide in, I think it was in Detroit, if I'm not mistaken. Um, Maybe it was in Milwaukee. And the people who were involved in the transaction took me to lunch. And it was an amazing experience because we started walking through the dining room in what I think was the Milwaukee Club, and I didn't see another black person in there. I didn't feel threatened by it. I didn't feel uncomfortable by it. And the thing is, I looked at my hosts, and they seemed to be very proud to be walking the length of the dining room with this black person and to hear the starch collars turn as we walked past them. And our table, which had been reserved, was up at the front of the dining room. So everybody got a very good view of me. But what the Shabazz thing, well, he was Lion Cross, then he became Lonnie Shabazz, and I think he probably had one or two names after that, and I can't remember them all. But we had a very good relationship, and I was actually the grader for the advanced calculus course. Um, Now there is another man, and I put him in a special place at the very beginning of the book, and that's Dr. Benjamin E. Mays. Um, I might pause here to say that there is a Mays Memorial site in Greenwood or Greenville, South Carolina, that I'll say a word or two about in a minute. But Mays was cited and is always cited for some of the of his sayings and quotes. And one of the quotes that he made was that if you're going to do a job, do it so well that no man could do it better than you, dead or alive, or not yet born. And so that was sort of one of the things that stuck with me. But all that requires preparation. And the reason that Mays has such a storied career that I think is not generally known is because he had undergone some of the things that the students had experienced who were going into entering Morehouse. Mays became the president of Morehouse, I think, in about 1942, and remained president until I think it was 1960 or 1980 something. But he was there during the whole time at the housing school. And every Tuesday morning, he would come in and give us some wisdom. But the wisdom was born out of his lived experience, as people say. He was born in a very poor family. His early memories were those of the Klan intimidating his father and his black community. They had a very hard scrabble life. The state of South Carolina built this memorial park, and they moved the residence that he grew up in from its original location to the park. And so you saw that it was bare, very bare. And they had a very, very rough time. And also moved the schoolhouse from its original location up to the Memorial Park. I was fortunate to be in a group of former Morehouse men who had graduated in 1962. The year before, we'd had our 50th class reunion. And when we found out about the Memorial Park, a few of us, maybe about 20 or so, attended the opening of the Memorial Park in South Carolina. They do have a website, and I think I cited somewhere in my documents. And I would encourage people to visit that to see um, what his early life produced. Um, I also found that revisiting all of this information that I had accumulated over my lifetime was cathartic, and I thought that it could be useful to other people because from time to time, somebody would say, "Well, how did you do that? Or
Hmm.
how did you think of that?" I remember when we were in Japan, I thought of an organization that would be called World Connect, which didn't really get off the ground. But I remember one of the senators from California saying, "How did you come up with that?" Well, to me, it was just a natural thing.
That's
Um,
something I was going to ask too, because one of the things that stood out to me about your story is how much history and global impact it covers. So, what inspired you to tell your story, and what do you hope the readers take away from your book?
well, one of the things that I hope that answering the last part of the question, one of the things that I hope that the readers will take away is knowing how to do certain things. And what happens is that builds confidence, and one little thing builds on the next. And then you reach a point where you decide, um, well, my opinion is as valid as anybody else's. And in some cases, my knowledge of certain things is superior to the knowledge of those other people. And it gives you a confidence that you just use in any number of places. Um, I I don't think I've ever had stage fright since the 10th grade. But but little by little, things developed. And then I wanted people to see uh, some of the places that I've been, to experience some of the absolute, what I called unvarnished, beautiful, extraordinary, unsurpassed humanity of people in Africa. There are conflicts. And you wonder sometimes how it is that people in African countries can turn on each other, but that's the reality of life. But however, the great majority are peaceful, absolutely beautiful people in terms of making you feel welcome and experiencing you as a human being. So what I wanted to do was to put all this experience and all this knowledge in a place where people could refer to it. And that's why I put it in a book so that it would be there in case somebody wanted to refer to it.
Love it.
Uh,
And I know from the beginning you had a strong vision of how you wanted the book presented. How did you hope working with Elly Virtually would support or enhance your publishing process and your overall vision for your book?
well, you see, in the beginning, I had no expectations
Okay.
because I had not ever heard of Elly Virtually. And what happened is there's a brilliant intellectual property lawyer by the name of Andrea Hintz Evans. She was a member of the National Bar Association, and that's where I met her. So from time to time, I would mention that, I'm writing a book, and she would check in on me, how's the book coming? How's the book coming? And so I said, well, it's almost ready. Now, keep in mind that this book did not happen overnight. I wrote it over a period of 13 years. I started in 2013. I looked back at my initial outlines, and that's when I started. So she would check on me from time to time. How's the book coming? The book is coming, okay, blah, blah, blah. So when I finally got ready and I said, okay, I finished, then she said, well, do you have a publisher? I said, no. She said, well, I'm going to refer you to the people that published all of my books. And they're called Elly Virtually. And you call Linda, and I'm sure they'll take care of you. And that is what has happened. I don't know what happens with other people in other places and other publishing venues, but I'm extremely happy that Andrea referred me to Elly Virtually. And I'm also very happy to recommend Elly Virtually to anyone who's thinking about publishing a book. And they have other talents. I don't know what they all are at this point, but they are very savvy in terms of anything that has to be communicated to audiences, on a wide basis.
Thank you. And yes, I've worked with Andrea for some years now. Absolutely love her. And now at this stage of the journey, what has been the biggest benefit or most meaningful result you've experienced since partnering with the Elly Virtually team?
Um, okay, let me try to answer that question. I think the biggest thing is the patience of working with the team because there were a lot of edits, there were a lot of changes, and there were a lot of things that I did not know. And I think which was demonstrated quite on a number of occasions. But Elly virtually carefully and patiently explained to me the questions that I asked. I don't think that there's a single question of the many, many that I asked that has gone unanswered.
Now,
So
would you recommend this process to other aspiring authors?
no question. Absolutely. 100%. Let
And
me
what
say
would you
one.
say? Mhm.
I want to say one other thing though, which I think is very important, and I don't want to forget. And that is when people read the book, they will see that I've gone a number of places. And so the question is, he must be wealthy to be able to go to all these places. But what happens is you find that as you meet people, um, opportunities present themselves where, for one reason or another, they want to take you along or they want to pay your way or what have you. And so that is how I was able to do certain things. I mean, the world peace through law. Can I just interject here?
Yes.
Okay. At one point in 1973, I received an invitation to attend the World Peace Through Law Conference in the Ivory Coast. And I said, oh, well, this is really interesting. How am I going to get there? But what I remembered is I had a very close friend, Charles Meredith, who has now passed away, who told me that Maynard Jackson, who was also a Morehouse graduate, Morehouse man, had told him that Dean Rusk, the former Secretary of State of the United States under John Kennedy, wanted to get more Black people interested in foreign affairs. And so I called Maynard and we had a discussion. I said, look, I received this invitation. I really would like to go, but I don't have any money. I can't go. I can't afford to go. Um, and so I'd like to find out what Dean Rusk has in mind. So Maynard gave me Dean Rusk's telephone number, and I did call him, and he was gracious enough to pick up the phone. We had a nice conversation. He said, oh, well, let me see what I can do, and I'll get back to you. Um, I don't remember if he said this in the conversation, but I do remember that what he did was to contact William Turk Thompson, Judge Thompson, who also had been a member of the National Bar Association, and I knew him. So I think he did say in the conversation, let me get in touch with Turk and see what we can do. And Turk at that time was a treasurer of the World Peace Through Law Center. So lo and behold, they contacted me and said, okay, we have, some funds for a number of lawyers to go. And that's how I got to the Ivory Coast. By the way, I've just come back from the Ivory Coast and I met the Ivorian ambassador to the United States last year at the National Bar Association convention, which means that people should join organizations because that's how you get to meet people. And he made a presentation to our international law section. And I told him that I had visited the Ivory Coast in 1973. And he said, well, you have to come back. You have to come back now. And so I said, okay, well, on my way back to the US next year, I'll stop in. And I did. So that was an interjection. I've forgotten what your question was.
Oh, I mean, your life experience just spans so many incredible moments in history. I was just trying to get an idea of what you would recommend. Would you recommend this process to an aspiring author, or what would you say to someone who has a story and they've been hesitant to publish?
I think that I would tell them what I would normally tell people, and that is, if you're going to have an operation, as Dr. McVeigh says, you don't want to walk into the operating room and the surgeon has a little book in his back pocket saying how to how to do this kind of particular surgery. You want to go with people who've had a lot of experience in doing those surgeries so that your chances of survival will be increased. And so I will say to them that, if the only experience you have is writing your book and you want to try to get it published, you should contact Elly Virtually because they will hold your hand, they will take you through the entire process, and you will not find a more supportive group of people.
Thank you. Absolutely appreciate that. Anything else you want to add before we close?
Well, I do want to add, and that is there are some things that people know about with respect to civil rights, but there are some things that they don't, that I do talk about in the book. And I will briefly mention them. One is what happened to the Japanese in Florida and California, that is not generally known. Even though I think most people knew about Jose Williams from the civil rights activities in Savannah and as a lieutenant of Dr. King's, um, I don't think that people generally know what he did in trying to interest the Japanese to come into Atlanta and to partner with African Americans to do business, and especially in the agriculture area. And that sort of relates to the first item that I just mentioned, and that is the Japanese were significant farmers in Florida before white people chased them out. And in California, during the time that Governor Warren at that time put them in internment camps because the economy of California was very heavily dependent upon the agriculture produced by these Japanese farmers. I also want to be sure to point people to Jefferson Beaver, who was the father of my late wife, Jane, the mother of my sons, who created a bank along with four other people.
Think we're frozen. Okay,
Are we
you were
okay?
frozen for a minute.
So, but in addition to making loans available to Black people, the bank also became well-known, TransPay Savings and Loan, I think it was called, started making loans to Japanese people to enable them to move out of the areas in which they were confined, and to Chinese people. And that is a history that I'm pretty sure is not known by many people. The last thing with respect to that is that the Third Baptist Church and Black organizations and individuals helped supported that bank, and the Third Street Baptist Church in San Francisco provided the remaining funds that they needed in order to satisfy the control of the currency. The last person that I would mention there in the United States is 95-year-old Fred Gray. And for people who are not familiar with him, I think he probably did more for civil rights in the United States as a lawyer than anybody else except maybe Thurgood Marshall. But when I spoke to Fred the other day, Fred is 95 years old. And I wrote articles for the Botswana Guardian during Black History Month, and I talked about Fred Gray. And one of the things I talked about was what he did with respect to the Tuskegee experiment in Tuskegee, Alabama. And that is the United States government was experimenting with Black men who had syphilis. And even after a cure was developed, they didn't treat those men. And Fred sued on their behalf. But one of the things he told me was he said, Leroy, you know more about the history of what happened in Alabama than people who live here currently. And this is an example of bringing to life some of that history that has been erased. So, and then do not underestimate your teachers and professors, most of whom had to make great sacrifices to get the knowledge that they got in order to convey that knowledge to you. So I have nothing but praise for the professors and teachers throughout my life, but especially in Savannah and at Morehouse and all the others. So I think that's about, oh, I should mention that the book also contains a very extensive write-up of Archibald Moquet, who was the late father of my now ex-wife, who was a fantastic woman in her own right, um, because he accomplished a lot in Botswana as as an individual who went through the school system that they had there at the time of independence in 1966. They didn't have too much of an infrastructure. They didn't have that. I think they only had about four people who were college graduates in all of Southern Africa. And he went on to become a minister, the permanent secretary to the first president, and one of the founders of the Republic of Botswana. So he's also mentioned in the book.
Thank you. And again, Leroy, I do want to thank you again for trusting Elly virtually with your story and for sharing part of your journey with us today. Your book, which is titled, and I'm going to put this in everything I post so everyone know how to access it. The book is History is Lived Before It Is Written, the autobiography of Leroy Wilson Jr., Esquire. And that is available on Amazon. You can also find it at Barnes and Noble and online. And so everyone watching, make sure you support Leroy Wilson Jr. new book, available in print and ebook format. And thank you for tuning in to another Client Corner with Elly Virtually.
And everybody watching also support Elly Virtually.
Thank you. Thank you.